Susan. All right, so I'll go ahead and call this advertised meeting of the school board into session at this time, and board members and superintendent will move through the agenda. And please stop me if there's any item or anything that we need to discuss a little further than at the speed we go. All right, of course, item 2 is the approval of the agenda.
Dr. White?
Yes, sir.
Before we move on with that, I would like to ask if we can pull from the May 14th meeting items number 10.1, which was a spot survey submission to the Florida Department of Education, parcel number 65 in Baker, and item 10.2, the sale and disposal of fish, parcel 65. I would like to move this to the discussion agenda if we can.
Okay, that was the,
These items were tabled, if we can untable.
Right, it's not on this agenda, but we spoke about it at the workshop. And I know, Mr. Destin, your motion included bringing it back to this agenda. I'm just trying to look down, Mr. Bryant, excuse me, board members. I want to see, is it already listed under discussion?
No.
Nope. Okay.
He's asking that
Chairman,
it was
with all due respect,
tabled.
I think the proper motion would be a motion to remove from the table.
Right, that's correct. So, Mr. Attorney, so as I understand the rules of order, the motion would be to remove from the table, and then should that motion succeed, then that item could be placed on the agenda for discussion.
Right. Actually, what is appropriate to put on the agenda would be for the purpose of a motion to remove from the table, and then if that passes, the item is there for discussion. So that has to happen before there could be any discussion.
I have one question, Mr. McGinnis. The item to remove it for discussion, I think would be appropriate, but if we're also going to vote on selling that property, do you think we need public notice for those who might be interested in the sale of that property? They would have notice to be at a meeting?
These two items that were on the last agenda, one simply authorizes an FDOE spot survey.
Okay.
The other is an initial resolution that surpluses the property, doesn't dispose of it, and directs the superintendent to come back with a recommendation.
So all right then, huh?
The vote tonight is not to, would not be to sell it. It's just simply, if you take that action, it would be to declare the surplus status,
right,
and then have the superintendent bring back a recommendation on disposal.
Thanks.
That's what was on the last agenda.
All right, so with that a little bit of clarification, and Mr. Walker, this is certainly your district. I don't know if you have any input, but at this juncture, we have a...
We just go through the procedure.
Okay, all right then. So at this juncture, we have a motion by Mr. Bryant.
I'll second it.
Second by Mrs. Thrush. Okay, any discussion about removing the item from the table?
One other question that, just from Robert's rules, Mr. Bryant was on the prevailing side of that, right?
That's correct.
Yes.
I believe
It was
okay.
a unanimous
Yes,
vote
it was.
to table it.
That's right. So any further discussion? All right, so what we're voting on then is moving this item off the table and putting it on the agenda for discussion.
Are you covering both of the items? Or
He read 10.1 and 10.2.
Right, correct.
Okay, any further discussion or comment? Seeing none, all in favor, let's vote. Vote is 5-0 to remove the item from the agenda. And so, Mr. Lawyer, I guess we're going to insert this down at discussion after we move through the consent. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, and that's labeled as item, I think it's actually going to be 10.2 and 10.3 because there already is a 10.1. Is that correct, Mr. Bryant?
Yes.
I think these would be 10.3 and 10.4. There's
3 and 4?
There's a placeholder as 10.2 for anything that could come off consent.
Okay, I got you. All right, good. So we've gotten that clarified, 10.3 and 10.4. Okay, so let's go on back up and look at the motion, or we need a motion to approve the agenda as amended, I guess.
Move it.
Motion by Mr. Walker.
Second.
Second by Mr. Bryant. Excuse me, Mr. Destin. Any discussion? All right, let's vote. The vote is 5-0. Okay. So that gets us through the approval of the agenda, gets us down to item 3. There are no recognitions tonight. There are no visitors. However, I have 3 cards for public comment. And so I know that the folks that are willing to make public comment tonight have had a chance to look over the rules on the back and Mr. McInnes, as I call these folks up, I know you'll give them some guidance,
Yes, sir.
and you'll be the timekeeper regarding the length of time that they are permitted to speak to. And so, the first individual I have here is Fegan Hayslip, I believe, from Baker. Yes, sir, Mr. Fagan. Please come forward, sir. Appreciate you being here.
We're glad to be here.
Yes, sir.
And Mr. Hayslip, you'll have 4 minutes to make your presentation.
Well, I represent the citizens of the Baker area, and right now we've ran out of space as far as where our business office is located.
Yes, sir.
We're kind of boxed in. We got Chelco Electric on our south end, and of course your property is on our north, and that's what we're interested in buying. We're like this board here. We're trying to look out for the future. Our people's always supported the Baker School activities, and we would like to have support from you folks. If you can approve this sale for us, it would help us out in the future. We're out of space there at our present location. We're on a parcel that's 150 feet by 100 feet, so we've used about all the space we can use. If we have a large truck coming in there to service our well, we have to move everything out of the yard in order for that truck to get in there to do their work. So if you people will approve this for us, it would go a long ways on us being able to plan for the future, build our storage areas where we need it. Our equipment, a lot of it's out in the weather, and that's just where we stand. And any consideration that you have, help us out on this situation. We appreciate it greatly, and I know the people in Baker will appreciate it also.
Well, I was going to ask, sir, I think you've got some folks here with you tonight, maybe.
I do. I should have introduced them to you. This is, of course, I'm the chairman of our board, and this is our board members. And we also have our system operator and our manager, Miss Wanda Patterson. She's done a great job, and I might add, she just finished 40 years of service for us.
My gracious. That's
Sure
good.
have. So we're proud of what all she's done for us. Sure. I'd like to commend the board on their accomplishments to make Baker School as great as it is. There's people that want to move to Baker to put their kids in school there.
That's right.
I hear that all the time. I don't have kids of my own, but I understand where they're coming from because I was raised in that area, Crestview and Baker area, and I know where they're coming from when they talk about wanting to bring their kids there for education.
Nice.
And I thank Miss Mary Beth and all the board members to put in your consideration to help us out on this matter.
All right,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Hayslip. Thank you, sir. Board members, any questions or you'd like to ask Mr. Hayslip about since he's here?
Mr. Hayslip, we discussed last time about having a very short-term, very cheap lease for what property you needed. That doesn't work for you guys?
Well, we want to build some permanent structure, and you know, like you don't want to build something there you may have to move later or tear down. We're more interested in permanent structure, so we'll can plan on out in the future. If you're familiar with that parcel that we're interested in buying, about half of it is wet weather pond. So in this big storm, the water's going to back up on about half of that property. No access to a little piece of it on the back side. We walked around it to see just how swampy it was. And right next to our fence, you know, we originally just asked for 1 acre, but we were told that we had to buy it all if we were going to buy it. So
We drive a hard bargain.
I understand that. I understand that.
How many acres is that parcel?
I think it was around 6.
6.6, I believe.
6.6.
Now,
Well,
this
that's
is
my
not,
district, and
I'm sorry.
That's my district, and to say one thing that may hurt you or help you, but I'm gonna be all in favor of letting y'all buy the property. And I know me and many of the board members kind of differ, but personally, I think it's something we'll never use. It'll be something y'all can use, and I can completely understand with the fact that you don't want to put permanent type structures on it, and so me as one board member, but it may hurt you, but I'm going to support you when it does come about.
I appreciate it, Mr. Walker. Any other
It is
questions?
my district. I hope the board members will kind of sympathize with
Well, thank you.
All
Well, I
right.
appreciate your
Yes, sir,
time
Mr.
and
Hazley.
consideration in this matter.
Thank you, sir. And we'll be taking this up shortly. As you know.
Appreciate that.
All right. All right, so the next visitor that we have is Mr. Stephen Mitchell from Destin, Florida. Mr. Mitchell, would you come forward, and Mr. McInnes, would you go over the little
Mr.
outline
Mitchell,
real
you'll have
quick?
4 minutes to make your presentation.
Absolutely.
Good evening, all. As you know, this board added the opportunity for the public to speak as witnessed by me standing before you at this time, but tonight I am asking for your consideration of the following. Many local municipalities and the county in their scheduled meetings allow the public to have 2 opportunities to speak. The first opportunity is typically utilized for a member of the public to speak on any item on the agenda and also to discuss on anything else they want to bring up before the governing body, but requires filling out a blue card or some other sign-up in advance procedure. The second opportunity is at the end of the meeting and does not require signing up in advance and allows the public that have attended the entire meeting a chance to opine. Frequently, members of the public attend meetings and have no intentions of speaking, but based on something that transpired during the course of the meeting, they step up and speak at the end of the meeting during the comments from the public section of the agenda. I have personally done this on numerous occasions, as well as others in attendance at meetings, based on something that was said during the meeting, based on having information that can answer a question, based on being willing to step up and help with a problem, and the list goes on and on. I have seen council meetings when they have discussed an issue and discussed how it would be some time before that particular item would be handled, only to have citizens step up and volunteer to do the task, which resulted in this case with the mayor of Destin instructing the city manager to have staff get with the citizen, etc. I'm asking this board to consider this, and I hope one of you will be willing to step up and make a motion to add to your meeting procedures the opportunity for final comments from members of the audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. Board members, any comments or questions about the suggestion?
Well,
Would you, Mr.
certainly
Mitchell?
as chairman, I would think you have the authority to let people speak at the end of the meeting, and I would certainly vote to give you that authority.
Okay, okay. Well, another great duty associated with my task. Let me ask the lawyer about that. I mean, I guess statutorily, we are meeting the letter of the law
Yes, sir.
at this juncture. And I don't know if our laws necessarily might be, or compulsions might be different, if you will, than the city governments that may provide for this. Do you have any thoughts about that at this juncture, or do we need time to look at it, or what do you think?
Certainly the way that the board's agenda is set up with your public comment time and then also allowing comment on any agenda items, you're meeting the full statutory requirements. Other agencies that allow the other time there, certainly that's within their jurisdiction and their discretion. But you are meeting the requirements of the law for public participation as you're structured now.
All right. That helps a little bit. Any other thoughts or questions about any of that, board members?
Mr. McGinnis, do
Yeah,
we
sure.
have, we also have public hearings that also provide an opportunity for members of the public to address the board on any adoption of policies that we have, or on any construction items that we have. So most items in those regards also allow for public comment. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Sure, Mr. Mitchell.
I didn't finish my 4 minutes, so I'll just respond if
Okay.
you don't mind. Just, I understand what you're saying, and that's certainly correct. But in county commissioner meetings in various municipalities, things happen spontaneously. You all could discuss a wide variety of things that are on the agenda, and people in the audience have no intentions of speaking. But something said that causes them to want to give you some feedback. It's not always negative, it can be positive. As I said, in Destin particularly, they were talking about not being able to cut some grass, and it was going to take some time for Public Works to do it. And there was a gentleman in the audience that was a gardener, and he stepped up and said, "I'll do it." Okay, Had he not had that time at the end for public comments, that's not a workshop, that's not something like that. So it just affords the audience that has sat in a meeting the entire time the ability to, it doesn't have to necessarily be 4 minutes, you could limit it to 2 minutes. But people come to these meetings and they may not have anything to say. They may not want to talk about the agenda, but something that occurred during the meeting causes them to want to talk, and the way that it's structured now, they're not allowed to do so. Again, just for your consideration. I know you meet the requirements. This is just above and beyond. And again, thank you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And so I guess, Mr. Destin, whether it be something that you afford me the opportunity to recognize individuals that may want to speak at the end, or whether it be something that you would prefer to actually have as a standing item on the agenda, just like when you made the motion to place public comment on the agenda now.
Yeah.
I think I would appreciate the motion and the vote of the board to either give me that particular latitude so that I feel comfortable that if I recognize someone to speak at the end of a meeting, all of y'all aren't going to be mad at me.
Well, the only thing that and what you brought this up, is I would support what you just said, except I want to be real certain that we have a time limit that's attached to it,
Thank you,
whether
sir.
it's 2 minutes, 3 minutes,
Okay.
whatever, because now I've seen other meetings, city council meetings and chamber meetings, when this took place, when it ended up one individual talked for over an hour.
Yeah.
And I can tell you this.
I don't want y'all to do that.
And I won't be on the board much longer, but if we go into this, I can promise you, if you don't set a time limit, I
Yes,
won't
sir.
be here when you finish.
Yes, sir. I got the message. All right, but so then that's how I would prefer to move forward with this, that there would be a motion to grant me that latitude with some specification of time limit, or a motion to put it on the agenda, and then board members, certainly, if that motion gets a second, then y'all can talk about it and discuss it, vote on it, however you would
Okay,
choose
well, I
to do
will
it. How
make
does that sound?
I will make a motion authorizing you to,
Oh,
to
right
allow.
now,
Yeah.
okay.
I'll second it.
To, let's cut it down to 2 minutes, since they've already had one bite at the apple. That'll make it quick.
Okay.
After all, you go through all the staff members at the end of the meeting, asking
Yes, sir.
them if they have something to say. I don't see
Okay.
a lot of difference, so
Okay.
that'll be the motion.
I'll second it.
All right, so Ms. Evans, you got that? Okay, so that motion then would be for the chairperson to recognize members of the public that may wish to speak at the end of the meeting for a period of time not to exceed 2 minutes?
2 minutes.
2 minutes?
Make it short and sweet.
All right, so there's a motion to that effect by Mr. Destin and a second by Mr. Walker. Okay, so any discussion, board members?
I just have one. Of course, I'm always in favor of the public speaking. I mean, that's what we're here for, is to
Right.
listen to the public. I just want to make sure that, we're not rushing into something without getting Mr. McInnes involved in it. Just make sure we word it correctly. We're not just throwing something together here just quickly. I feel more comfortable if we just get it to where it's worded right, so.
Well, my motion would include direction for the board attorney to bring it back in sufficient legal form.
But I think that was the difference, if I understood Dr. White's comments correctly, was the difference between the two options. One option was to give Dr. White that authority right now with the time limit. The other option was to ask that the item come on the agenda, and that would allow Mr. McInnes to vet existing policies, because we did modify, if I remember correctly, a board policy in regards to public speaking, and would also have a chance for the board attorney to look at other opportunities, or again, the best wording for it to be. So I would prefer that it come as an agenda item that has been vetted by the school board attorney prior to us voting on it this evening.
Okay.
Do you have any reservations? As I pointed out, we asked the staff and the union representatives and everybody at the end of the meeting, as a matter of routine, do they have anything to say? Is this different in your mind?
The only thing I'd suggest is we did recently revise your board policy on public participation, and we do change it when there's a statutory change or the board changes. To be consistent, it would seem to me that we should consider putting that additional time on, for the agenda into that policy, so that when we hand that out to people about what their opportunities are, that's not going to be there if we don't do it that way.
I don't have a problem with that at all.
And I would just say that should the board wish to vote on this particular motion, I still don't see a problem with us doing that after the fact. I mean, if the board wishes to vote tonight, that in the future, starting tonight, that we're going to recognize folks at the end for 2 minutes, I don't know why we couldn't do that, and still, Mr. McInnes, you revise the policy as necessary and bring it forward at a later time. But that's just my thoughts. I could be wrong.
Well, I would think we will have to vote to give direction to Mr. McGinnis
Yes.
in any event.
Okay.
That's right.
So, do you wish to withdraw your motion, modify your motion?
Just
or-
modifying it to let Mr. McGinnis put it in the form that he thinks is legally supportable.
Okay.
In the board policy.
Right.
And so that means that that will be advertised?
Yes, sir.
And we'll go through that process, and we understand that that's not something then that we're going to start immediately.
As
Okay.
do you, I believe, since you do it every night. You have the authority to do it now. So, anyway, we'll do it in a more formal manner.
Okay. All right then.
I just have
Sure,
one more question
sure.
for Mr. McGinnis. So in regards to modifying our policy, normally we have to advertise a change in policy. And so, even though we would be possibly making a modification to it, it could be, more than a
Yes,
month
ma'am.
before that policy is modified.
That's right.
Correct. I mean, I will need to bring
Sure.
the revision back to you for your permission to advertise for the public hearing, and then we would do the process we follow.
Okay. Go ahead, just a minute.
And I would just state that I would prefer that we make an effective change to adding that public comment section to the agenda at the same time that the policy has been modified, so that, again, our policy coincides with our procedure.
So let me see if I understand that. And I don't mean to belabor this,
Sure.
but Mr. McInnes, do you understand what I guess what she's suggesting is that this actually become a placeholder on the agenda? Is that correct?
Well, I mean, that's what we're asking, correct?
I'm understanding that what Ms. Thrush has simply said was that she wanted to follow the normal policy adoption
Right.
and revision process.
Right.
And that when that is completed, if the board adopts it, that's when it would then become a standing agenda item to
It'd
be
be on the
used.
bottom of the agenda?
Correct.
Is that correct?
That's correct, and
So
that's
that-
how I prefer, I mean, I'm just, stating my opinion of what my wishes would be versus what's being proposed in Mr. Destin's motion.
And I'm just trying to get the process worked out. Nothing, no judgment or commentary.
Sure.
But I think that would be an amendment to the original motion, and I don't think that Mr. Destin was asking this to be a standing item on the agenda.
If Ms. Thrush would like to make a substitute motion, I would be happy to entertain it.
Well, then I'm going to say that's what she's done, without going through all that again.
If that's what she's trying to say, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be a natural result of the change in the policy, because the policy, once it provides all the opportunities for public input, we would typically revise the agenda format to match the policy.
Okay? Okay.
Right,
Good with that?
Well,
Yeah, good with
I
that.
guess what I'm saying is, I don't want us to start asking for public comment at the end of agenda without the policy being updated first. Like you stated, I want us to follow normal procedure.
Which is what you're going to do, right?
Yes, sir, as long as that's what your motion's directing.
Yeah.
Okay, because I understood your motion, again, not to belabor things, to be otherwise, that you wanted to start this evening with being able to add
I
public
sure hate
comment.
for us to get something difficult we'd have to decide on.
Well, one thing about modifying the agenda, we'll be living with it for a long time, and so will our predecessors. So we want to be cautious and careful with that. All right, any further discussion about that?
So can we repeat the motion just so I understand what we're?
Yeah, I haven't made an amendment. I was thinking under Robert's rules, we would vote on Mr. Dustin's motion in second, and then, you know, a new motion could be made, but are
I think
you
if-
saying it'd be more preferable to amend
I think if we
it?
could just get Mr. Destin's motion ironed out now, that'll be one action. And Mr. Destin, what you just said to me, I'm understanding your motion is that the board attorney be directed to review the current policy on public participation, make an appropriate recommended change back to the board to add a 2-minute public comment section to the end of your meeting agendas,
Exactly.
and that you will then consider the language, and if you approve it, it'll be advertised for public hearing like every policy is, come back here for public hearing and vote. Once it's adopted, then we would make the revision to the agenda and implement the process.
That's exactly the motion, yes.
Okay.
So do I need to second it again?
Just
Sure.
if you're confirming that's what you understood, Mr.
Lost
Walker.
track, but yes, I'll be happy to
Okay.
second.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All right, let's vote. All in favor? Vote is 5-0. All right. Okay, so, all right, we have one other visitor tonight, or public comment, and this is by Mr. Gene Early of Fort Walton Beach, Florida. Mr. Early. And Mr. McInnes? Okay, yes, sir. You're here. And so, Mr. McInnes, if you would provide the rules regarding time and so forth.
You'll have 4 minutes to make your presentation.
Got it, Jeff. Thank you. School board members, we've been dealing with some issues for a while now. I sent y'all a report from the sheriff's office that had some interesting information in it. It showed documents existed that I'd been told, frankly, did not exist. Okay? Eric will attest to this, that if you request Mr. Farley's investigation on Miss Stillions, that's what you will get. No other documents available. I've requested it a dozen different ways, through different things for different pieces, parts that I heard existed. That's what you get. Within the sheriff's office report, it actually lists the full report, and it lists letters, it lists other things that the sheriff's report got just as soon as they found out about this case. So the sheriff's report requested by subpoena the full report with all of the statements and everything else to it. Tracked it down through Larry Ashley. Larry Ashley said he'd already sent it over because when they transferred the case to the state attorney's office, it went with it. Okay? So I requested it, and this is what I got. 278 pages, not 22. By the same token, within Mr. Farley's investigation of Mr. Frazier and the subsequent actions by the DOE, there were DOE records. These records by the DOE were sent to both the superintendent and to Miss Stacy Smith directly. It's in the records. I checked with them. They said yes, they were sent to the school under those two names. They do not exist in your records, but here it is. That's the DOE report. It was sent in 2 copies to the school district. By the same token, y'all have had other things that have been denied and said that they don't exist, which include the union's report or the union's complaint that apparently is what was a nexus to stop the Stillions investigation from going any further and any action being taken on Ms. Stillions. Document after document after document, Eric has told me doesn't exist. Now, do I trust Eric? Yeah, I do. I've worked with him a long time. I got no complaints with what he does for you or how he treats the public. Absolutely zero. Eric checks. Eric looks. Eric asks the right questions. He's even gone personally to Mr. Farley and asked him, do you have any of these copies so I can get them to Mr. Early? Mr. Farley's only answer was they were in my office when I was arrested and when I was suspended. Now, those records right there you've got from the sheriff's office were handed over by Brandy Hand. I've got the invoice and everything else that went with them. So as of the date she handed them over, they were in y'all's possession. Where are they now? And we're talking about record after record after record and document after document. And I'll tell you, if you ask Eric, he'll attest to the fact that he has to reply, document doesn't exist, not in files. And these documents should be. They haven't met their disposition requirements. They haven't met their due date for destruction or any of the other things. They're still good documents. They should be in y'all's document files, in your records, in your folders, in your files, somewhere. I asked him, what's your next step? I'm going to ask you, what's your next step? The Florida Department of Law Enforcement has got a committee or a branch that actually does the investigations on this. I personally don't think y'all have it within y'all's resources to investigate this right here. I'm requesting y'all go out of your own resources and call in the FDLE and ask them to come and find where y'all's documents are, or go to the DOE, because the DOE can investigate the same thing. This isn't petty stuff. This is some serious stuff. And that's all I've got on that subject tonight, sirs. Or, excuse me, school board members.
All right, Mr. Early, so if I understood, you're saying that we had these documents at one time.
You've got the sheriff's office report that
Right,
shows
right.
that they were turned over to him. Yes, sir.
Okay, so we had them at one time, and now we don't.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right.
And they have not reached their disposition date. They should still be in your files.
Any comments, board members?
Mr. Chairman, I would request that if you would let me have those notebooks and let me get back with Mr. Mitchell. I want to double check and be sure that some of the information that I don't know what's in there, but some of the information about the Stillions report, I want to double check it against what the district does have, because I mean, there certainly are more records about that report than just strictly Mr. Farley's written report. And so we need to double check and be sure, Mr. Early,
Well,
that
Jeff,
there's a clear communication.
okay.
Is all I'm suggesting.
Right. Eric can pull it up and show you. I requested the full report, all witness statements. I'm very detailed when I put a request in. And Eric has asked these questions numerous times, just to give you a
Yes,
little
sir.
background. Eric, you have my permission to pull anything that I've requested and give it to him with no problem, okay?
But I'd
You
just like an opportunity to double
Right.
check.
I've got no
the-
problem with
the
that,
file
sirs.
and
Yeah,
records.
ma'am.
So then, will you be giving us a communication about
Certainly,
this matter,
certainly.
or how will you?
Certainly.
Okay, will that be at a meeting, or will you do it personally, or what's that?
I mean, if we look at it and confirm that we've actually got the records, we'll just let you know they're there, and whatever Mr. Early wasn't provided, as long as it can be provided and needs to be redacted or whatever, that can be done. I don't know, and I don't want to guess at what was or was not delivered, but I think we can take those and double check that.
Well, that one right there, the one document is exactly what Eric delivered to me. In there were two different requests that had this information in it for two different purposes. That's all I got either time. Now, within that, I asked Eric very specifically about the ones that came in from the DOE, because when I went online and took a look at the Frazier investigation for the DOE, one of those documents is on there, and it says it came to the district in 2 copies. I called, checked, talked to them. They said, yes, it went. So I requested the full document file, and that's what they sent. Eric can attest to the fact I requested that exact document by date, by name, and everything else, and didn't exist in your files. You know,
Well,
I don't bring these in lightly.
Yes, sir, and I'm not drawing any conclusions. I'm just suggesting.
You want a chance to look at
That
it.
if I could have
Right.
a chance to look at them, I'll be glad to get with Eric and.
Then I will
double check.
ask one thing to amend that. I'll ask Eric to tell you how many he has had to reject that way because no documents have been found, because other people who've requested documents have told me they have got that answer time and time again. I'm not the only one,
Understand.
so.
Well, let me do this. Matter of public record, I'm moving these your way.
Sure.
Mr. Chairman, this is pretty serious stuff. If we can't handle public records any better than this, I would request that Mr. McGinnis give us a report on his findings at the next school board meeting.
Certainly.
There's only copies of it.
If I need to make a motion to that
I
effect,
think
I
so.
will.
Let's get it on the record.
Yeah, whenever you finish with them, just let me have.
I also think we need to consider this is an accusation. There's no proof here.
That's right.
Yeah.
This is just something that this gentleman is saying is happening. And I am a little frustrated that every time something is brought forward, people just go, oh, it must be true. Well, we found several things not to be so. And Eric is extremely careful with documents. I don't see them, I don't touch them. So I don't think we need to jump off of a ledge tonight just because an allegation has been made. I think we need to look and see what is there. I can't understand half of the things he sends anyway. They don't make any sense. So Eric, if you would just really take the opportunity to do that. Because I certainly do not tell Eric to withhold things. Eric has testified to that on numerous occasions. There are times when we do not have the documents. So I think it's time for us to settle down and let's take the time to give Eric and the attorney an opportunity to look. Just because an accusation is made doesn't mean it's true.
I would agree wholeheartedly with that. I don't think Ms. Jackson would purposely do anything wrong. But
No.
if we got the records from the state, somewhere in our computer, it should show that we got them.
And you can't remove that from the server.
That's exactly
If
right.
we have it, it's
So-
on the server.
And so then we should be able to track these things down forensically pretty easily. And I would be interested to know what happened. Because I don't think either you or Eric would do anything unlawful.
If anything happened, we
If
need
anything
to make
happened.
sure
Exactly.
that something is really wrong
Yep.
first.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, Mr. Early, I'm going to recognize you, sir.
Didn't make an accusation. All I did was tell you what his response was to me, what the state's response to me, and what the state attorneys responded to me. The documents are right there in front of you. I didn't make them up, I didn't create them, and I'm not making an accusation. I'm telling you what happened. That's it.
All right.
Okay? As you heard me say, I didn't say a thing about Eric, and I didn't say a thing about Miss Jackson. Didn't open my mouth about either one of them. I told you, Eric has been very supportive, and he's helped me with everything I've requested. If he can't find it in the system, that's not his fault, and I'm not blaming Eric. Bottom line.
I understand, Mr. Early. I understand the superintendent.
And I also want you to know that I do have a stack of emails from Mr. Early that he has sent to you with various and sundry ridiculous accusations toward me. And I find those offensive. I find them personally ridiculous. He has no way to prove 90% of what he puts in those emails. The goal here is to separate me from the board. And if you can't see that and can't see the game we're playing here, then we've got other problems. But I personally am offended by your accusations, especially where you insinuate that I broke into someone's office. Yes, you did. I have the email. So I'm finished with this conversation now, but I will no longer put up with false remarks about me from you. So you just get prepared.
Excuse me, board members.
4 minutes is up. It's been up.
Lynn,
If you'll check it, sir, I never said she broke in. Mr. Farley's email was sent to you, not to me. I didn't say anything in this world
well,
about
I
that.
have the emails. I have the hundreds of emails.
Mr. Chairman, you need to bring this to a
Yeah, I
halt.
think so too.
You need
Yeah,
to bring
yeah,
this
yeah,
to a
yeah.
halt.
All right,
Right
Mr.
now.
Early, unless you've got, I mean,
You need to
normally
bring it to
I
a
would
halt.
grant a rebuttal, but I think we're probably at the juncture where we don't need to do that.
Thank you.
And this case, this situation, Mr. McInnes, I understand you're going to look at it.
Yes, sir.
And Mr. Destin, were you making a motion, or how do you want to
I was
handle that?
requesting that you bring it back in a timely
I will
fashion.
report back to you at the next
You
meeting.
need a second? You need a second?
No, sir,
on
I'm
it?
just saying I will do that.
If he's saying he'll do it, I don't think we need it. Yep.
Okay, all right then. So, thank you, Mr. Early.
Thank you.
All right,
You can hold the other card.
sir?
You can hold
Oh.
the other card. I'll come back to that another night.
All right. all
Thank
right.
you, sir.
All right, all right. Anything else, board members? All right, let's move on. Let's go into personnel appointments, and we're on section 6, and this would be administrative personnel appointments. 6.1 is the appointment of principal, Richburg School, recommended by the superintendent for approval.
Thank you,
Superintendent,
Mr.
I don't know
Chairman.
if you have,
She, I explained to you all
Yes,
in the
ma'am.
workshop, her husband is gravely ill and she's not able to be with us. But she did ask me if I would
Okay, sure.
read
You want to read
her.
it from there or from the podium?
Well, here's
Take your-
fine,
Okay,
don't you
okay,
think?
Sure, sure.
A product, Nicole Rickman. I'm a product of the Okaloosa County School District. Nicole graduated from Crestview High School in 1991 and received her bachelor's degree from the University of West Florida. Before deciding to enter the education field, Nicole worked with juvenile probation. Working with these young adults, she realized that she wanted to work with these students and try to change their path before they entered the juvenile system. Nicole taught middle school and high school dropout prevention students for 6 years before becoming the dean of students and then the assistant principal at Richburg School and Best Chance North. During these 6 years, Nicole also served as the ESE teacher, the lead teacher, and served on the school advisory council. Nicole completed her master's degree in educational leadership in 2013 and the Okaloosa County School District Level 2 Leadership Program in 2015. She is married to Jason, a sergeant with the Santa Rosa County Sheriff's Office for almost 24 years, and they have 3 children who all graduated from Baker School. Garth is a senior at the Naval Academy in Annapolis. Caitlin is an OCSD substitute teacher and daycare worker, and Logan is a sophomore at Florida State University. Ms. Nicole Rickman.
All right, so we're looking for a motion to approve the appointment. Mr.
I'll make the
Bryant, that's
motion.
your
I'll make the motion, please.
motion by Mr. Bryant. Second by Mr. Walker. All in favor? The vote carries 5-0.
Thank you.
All right, Superintendent, you have another one here, I
Yes.
believe?
Miss Wanda Avery. So many of our folks are vacationing this week, so I will read hers, if you don't mind.
Sure, sure.
Wanda Avery is a product of the Okaloosa County School District. After attending the Old Holt School in 2nd grade, she transferred to Baker School, where she attended until graduating. After graduating from Baker High School, Wanda attended Okaloosa Walton Junior College. I can hardly say that anymore because it's Northwest Florida State College. And graduated from the University of West Florida with a bachelor's degree in medical technology. She worked several years as a medical technologist before becoming certified to teach. Beginning in 1984, Wanda taught chemistry and zoology at Crestview High School and completed her master's in ed leadership. She became an assistant principal at the high school in 1999, transferred to assistant principal at Richburg Shoal River Middle School in 2002, and then served as principal at Antioch Elementary from 2011 to 2014. Wanda took over the leadership of the Okaloosa STEM Academy in July of 2014. Miss Avery.
All right, so that's STEM Academy. Ms. Thrush?
I'll make a motion to approve the superintendent's recommendation.
All
Thank
right,
you.
motion by Ms. Thrush, need a second.
Second.
That was a tie.
It was.
Motion second by Mr. Walker, deferring to seniority. All right, any discussion? All right, let's vote. All in favor? Vote is 5-0. All right, very good. Okay, let's move on to Section 7. Congratulations, by the way, to both folks. All right, Section 7, Committee and Staff Reports. We've covered those in the workshop. Moving on to Consent Agenda. Looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda. Motion by Mr. Walker. Sure.
Dr. White,
Yes, ma'am.
on 8/17,
All right, let me scroll down there real quick. Okay.
okay,
All
that's
right.
the self-help
8/17.
project
Right.
at Richburg School.
Yes, ma'am.
We spoke at length during the workshop about that item.
Yes, ma'am.
And I know Mr. Destin wasn't able to be in attendance at the workshop. Briefly, Mr. Destin, my concern was not that I don't want this project to go forward, and I know we have a construction item, later on that's related to this. My concern was having a plan for. I stated that as written, as the project is written, there are no plans and therefore funds being approved to actually put different equipment in that room, to put countertops, cabinetry, things like that. So that would have to come down the road later in the forms of an additional change order with additional funds. And my concern was, do we have a plan for the future for that life skills classroom? And if we did, even if this particular project couldn't afford the equipment that might be needed for our future plan, can we go ahead and ensure that the infrastructure, or I believe Mr. Bolton worded it better than myself at the workshop, utility support is in the proposal that's before us this evening. And so I had just heard in speaking with Ms. Rickman and staff at the school that certainly some of the life skills kitchen equipment is working, but as they've had an increase in the number of students, it might not adequately meet their needs. And you know, between what a need is, what a want is, and then what our plans for life skills for their students was my concern with the proposal before us, that we haven't, you know, I compared it to renovating my kitchen. I can't afford any of my appliances yet, but then I didn't wire that room correctly or sufficiently to support further purchases later on.
And I think the example you gave was commercial equipment that would require 220, is that correct? Mr. Bryant, you talked about that?
Right, and we talked about commercial grade, then you'd have to upgrade that
And there were
facility to.
Well, let me
health
interject.
inspections
First
issues.
of all, let me interject. I've been in charge of this project with Mr. Kucheratis and Ms. Bolden. And let me assure you that what has kind of got all this messed up is the fact that everybody's been running up there talking to the teacher and doing things like this without, you know, one policy that I have, whatever my board member, what my money is or whatever, I make sure that I talk to the principal first. And I say, now, if you meet with the individual teacher and if you decide that this is what you want for this particular classroom or whatever, if you give me the approval, then I would look at assisting. But I went up and I very thoroughly looked at this thing, met Mr. Kucheratis and Mr. Bolton, and spent several hours on this. And there's not any way if any of y'all went and actually talked to the principal, she's not indicated at one time that she wants all of this right now. And it's foolish to think that you want to go put 220 plugs in for the future thing. And when you look at what we're talking about, look at all the other schools we have. We're not talking about building a commercial kitchen for these kind of kids. And you know, this board has been gracious enough with the superintendent to raise $1 million to give these kids an adequate place to have their school. And now we're wanting to all of a sudden come in here and want to talk about change orders and add more money. And Nick Kucheratis and Steve Bolton has spent hours with Jacobs on making sure that we do one thing, have the classrooms ready for the fall and everything else, but then we get into like a hood that they want over a stove that Mr. Destin has to have in his restroom. Well, this is foolish, folks. Let's go ahead and give the kids what we need to give them, but not start talking about spending another $80,000 or $100,000 on a commercial kitchen when it probably won't never be used. In some of the kitchens that I've looked in that we're talking about, I've seen stoves that was never turned on for 5 or 6 years. But I mean, for us to start talking about wiring 220 for the the is so ridiculous that what we need to do is concentrate on what this board superintendent's done. We funded the project. The Levin Lord and him have been up there unbelievably accomplishing so we could get through by the fall. And we keep bringing up and talking about we're depriving the teacher of not making sure that she's got a commercial stove, and she's got a hood that's as large as this room. Well, I mean, I've personally met with Nick and Steve, and they have called me 4 times within the last week, assuring me that they've met what they think is absolute need for that classroom and those teachers. Now, we need to move on, and I don't understand why we want to start talking about having to do all of this extra wire and making sure that we have a commercial hood and all of this, when we should just be thankful that we don't help these kids, we don't have their classrooms, and move on. If Steve Bolton and Nick come back at a later date and say, hey, we do see we need, but I'm way more concerned about making sure we have adequate bathrooms that are enough for the wheelchairs to go in. Those are the kind of things we should be concerned about, and not be worried about where we got a hood that Mr. Destin don't even use in his restaurant. So what I'm saying, we need to go move on with this project and quit confusing things, to acting like we're not doing the proper thing at this time. And we all understand when we go with these projects, with the lack of money we have, how in the world do we think that we can predict 10 years down the road where we put a damn 2-pointing line in it or not? And we need to move on with this thing, and it keeps coming back, and I don't know what else to do other than the hours that we spent on this thing and trying to make sure we get it ready for the fall. And Mr. Bryant has spent hours up there working with the school, and I'm just so happy that the board, the superintendent, was able to get this project done. But it's unbelievable, all of a sudden now we're starting to get all tied up on where we don't have a commercial stove or a commercial hood or something. I don't understand this.
I just have 2 things. Mr. Hayslip, do y'all have this much fun at your board meetings?
No.
All right, and I'm ready to move on, Ms. Thrush, and entertain a motion to move the consent, unless you want to pull this and move it to discussion.
No, and I mean, I'm actually in agreement with Mr. Walker. That's my concern. No, it won't be the first, Mr. Walker, but what I'm saying is the process that the board has created is that individuals can come to board members and ask them to spend capital discretionary funds. And my concern is that, you know, any board member being asked to purchase something that we haven't planned for, and that possibly that could cost us more money later on than just whatever the capital discretionary funds were spent on. And so that was my concern with the project, and since you weren't here at the workshop, I just wanted to share that with you.
Okay, and I'll give you the benefit of some of my discussions, and I told the teachers up there that anything they wanted had to be approved by Ms. Rickman. And I did say that I would make some of my capital money available for them should they get her permission. But I see that is on down the road. We need to go forward with what we have and get it done.
All right, so I'm ready for a motion to move the consent.
Can I make one quick comment? real
Okay,
quick?
all right.
Just on 8.19, Mr. Destin.
Okay, very good. Moving to a different item.
Yeah, you weren't here the other day, but I just wanted to say thank you for supporting Richburg School with your capital outlay money. I really appreciate that. So,
A worthy cause.
All right, I'm
Move
looking
it.
for that motion.
Move
Motion
it.
by Mr. Walker,
Second.
second by Mr. Destin. Any further discussion? Let's vote. All in favor? Vote carries 5-0. All right, let's slide on down to human resources. All right, this is a lengthy section, you folks know. All right, item 9.1, employees on administrative leave. This is an information item. We've covered that. Item 9.2, request to advertise a public hearing for adoption of a job description for Assistant Route Coordinator Transportation presented by Ms. Lindsay Maxey, Specialist Human Resources, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, just a moment's discussion. This is a new position, right?
I'll defer to the experts.
Yes.
And we're how far away from our budgetary process? A month?
Right. This would be part of that.
And you know, it seems to me that we're putting the cart before the horse.
Well, this is just advertising the job description. It's not actually hiring
I understand.
somebody.
I would question how many job descriptions we advertise and haven't hired. It'll end up in the budget automatically. So, I'm not gonna be able to keep supporting new jobs without the budgetary process having been complete. In the staffing grid that we did 2 or 3 months ago, there was $230,000 worth of new jobs. This is another one, there's another one down the way. To do that before we've gone through a budget seems to me that doesn't make a lot of sense.
Won't you put it in a motion?
Well, I'll move that we put this off until after the budgetary process.
Why
Okay.
don't you include all of
Okay.
them?
Any new hires?
Well, can Mr. McGinnis, just in the past, typically how we've done things in the past, if I understand them correctly, is we publicly advertise a job description. Just because we have a job description out there doesn't mean we necessarily hire people. And I think what Mr. Destin is wanting is what, if I'm correct, is what HR was planning to do during the budget process, is come to the board with their proposals for positions. I'm sure they're having to, and I believe Ms. Jackson sent us all an email in regards to restructuring of HR. And I'm sure there's restructuring in other areas too. In the case of the transportation job, I know it was mentioned at the workshop that currently the route coordinators have a large discrepancy of the number of buses and bus drivers and maintenance staff that they supervise. In my area, in the central zone, it's roughly 40 bus drivers and then additional maintenance staff. Up in the north zone, where this assistant position would possibly come to us in the budget discussion, they have over 100 bus drivers and subsequent. So that's 2.5 times the number of drivers, yet those positions are equal, but clearly their responsibilities aren't. And we've had some incidents related up in the north end of the area in transportation and trying to provide more supervision. But I understand your concern, but we can, during the budget discussion, decide to approve or not to approve that position if the transportation department brings it to us in addition.
correct.
But just having a job description out there doesn't necessarily mean that we fill the position. We have several job descriptions out there that we don't have positions for currently on our budget.
And I spoke to Mr. McGinnis and listened to the very arguments that you're making and may well support this later on. But this money has to come from somewhere.
But this isn't a money request. It's just a job
The position will be a
description.
paid request, and I understand this is just a description of the job, but still, philosophically, it does make sense to me to advertise for jobs that we may not have the money for.
But we're not advertising for a job. We're
It's a job
advertising
description.
just the description.
And as I said, how many job descriptions have we approved over the years that never got filled?
None.
So, my motion is to put this off until after the budgetary process.
Well, if we do one, we need to do them all.
Yep, and let's look through and see what more there is.
Well, 9.3 looks like another
Yeah.
revised.
It's a
revised job
revision.
description.
That's
Yes,
not a
ma'am.
new-
Right.
That's a
I see
revision.
that.
That's
Right.
a
9.4 is an old one? Yeah, the motion would just be not to have any more descriptions for new positions until after the budgetary process. Seems pretty common sense to me, but maybe you'll disagree.
Looking for a second.
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Walker. Any further discussion? All right, let's call the question. All in favor of the motion to withhold this job description until after the budget?
Right.
Okay.
Then it's a motion to table it, isn't it?
If it's not a motion to table to time certain after the budgetary, I can make it like that. You want to do it that way?
I mean, that way the item's
All right.
here's just been
Okay.
tabled.
Board members, so the revision is a motion to table until after the
Budgetary process.
budgetary process occurs. Okay, so Mr. Walker, you hold your second. All right, any more discussion about a motion to table? Hearing no more discussion, let's vote. All in favor of the motion? Okay, the vote passes 3-2. All right, 9.3. Request to advertise a public hearing for adoption of a revised job description for delivery personnel school food service, presented by Ms. Lindsay Maxey, Specialist, Human Resources, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. Looking for a motion.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Bryant. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Ms. Thrush. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, let's call the question and vote. All in favor? The vote carries 5-0. 9.4, request to double fill the principal position at Destin Elementary School, presented by Mr. Marcus Chambers, Assistant Superintendent Curriculum Instruction, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. Looking for a motion.
Mr. Chambers, how much is this going to cost?
$42,374.
36?
Nope, $42,374.
Right there, dude.
I don't have my glasses, thanks.
And the purpose for this is Mr. Al Gardner is retiring. There's a nice article in the paper today, if you didn't see it. But he can actually leave us August 1st because of all the leave time that he's accrued. And we felt that it was very important for someone to be on staff there with time for him to train them. That's a very big school. How many students do we have?
Yeah,
We have
close to 900.
850 in an elementary school. And we just felt like for the smooth transition for the students and the school that this was necessary.
And school starts August 13th.
Yes, it does.
I'll make a motion to approve the recommendation.
And I'll second it.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, all in favor, let's vote. Vote carries 5-0. All right, 9.5, employment separation is presented by Mr. Marcus Chambers, Assistant Superintendent, Curriculum and Instruction, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. Looking for a motion?
I'll move it.
Motion by Ms. Thrush, second by Mr. Walker. All in favor? Vote carries 5-0. Employee transfers presented by Mr. Marcus Chambers, Assistant Superintendent, Curriculum and Instruction, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. Motion by Mr. Walker.
Second.
Second by Mr. Destin. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Vote carries 5-0. 9.7, reinstatement, reimbursement of sick leave for the line of duty illness, presented by Mr. Marcus Chambers, Assistant Superintendent, recommended by the Superintendent. Looking for a motion? Motion by Mr. Walker,
Second.
second by Ms. Thrush. Hearing or seeing no indication of discussion, let's vote. All in favor? Vote carries 5-0. 9.8, leave without pay, presented by Mr. Marcus Chambers, Assistant Superintendent, Curriculum and Instruction, recommended by the Superintendent for approval. Motion by Mr. Walker.
Second.
That tie. I'm going to defer to Mr. Destin.
Yes.
Mr. Destin, second. All in favor, let's vote. Vote carries 5-0. All right, discussion agenda. The first item is 10.1, ITB 8-15, replacement generator for the Nutrition Center in Niceville, Florida, presented by Mr. Wyndham, Program Director, Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. This is the consequence of a motion, Mr. Destin, that you made from the last meeting to move this
It
to
was.
discussion and to bring it back this evening. So,
Yep. We have done a little bit of research on both leasing and purchasing. My recommendation, since Vince tells me that the generator we have is still working, it's just hard to get parts for it, that's my understanding, and we have time to reject the bids and rebid and see if we can't get a better deal. Anytime we only have one bid on a chunk of money this big, it makes me very, very nervous. So I'll make a motion that reject bids and put it back out to see if we get any better response this time.
Second.
all right, I have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Just real
Yes,
quick,
sir,
the
Mr.
money that's already set aside for this, Ms. Gallen, is this money still going to be there if we put it out for rebid? Or will it still be? Okay.
I couldn't see the answer. The answer to that
She
was
said yes.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you. All right, so that funding will still remain there
Yep.
if you rebid it. So any other discussion about the motion? Seeing or hearing none, let's vote. All in favor of the motion? Vote carries 4-1. All right, it's moving on now to item 10.3. All right, Mr. McInnes, 10.3 was which one, or Ms. Evans? We want to make sure we're discussing the right particular item.
I believe this is the
Spot
spot survey
survey.
item that was on the
Spot survey.
agenda.
And it's from the May 14th agenda.
Yep, that's the issue, board members. You're going to have to go back to a previous agenda. Are you passing it out, Tim?
This-
That's actually the resolution.
Yeah, this is
18.
Okay,
this
that's
is
not
the,
all right.
the second item.
Okay,
The
yeah.
spot survey was
You have
a,
it?
a one-page document.
Okay, go ahead and give us some information there, Ms. Rush, if you don't mind, since you've got it pulled up. This is a survey of the property.
And Mr. Smith can probably provide you a outline
Dr.
of
Smith, are
the
you here?
spot
Yep.
survey.
There we go. Very good, very good. There you go, gentlemen. Pass that down, I guess. Thanks, Doc. Go ahead.
The spot survey is a requirement by DOE to dispose of property.
Right.
They're now done electronically. Years ago, it took a very long period of time to do them. This one has already been reviewed by DOE, 24, 48 hours that we approved once it's voted on by the board.
All right, so you need this spot survey voted for approval, is that correct?
Approval if we plan on moving forward to sell the property.
All right, so then I'm looking for a motion then.
Move it.
Motion by Mr. Walker.
Second.
Second by Mr. Bryant. Any discussion? All in favor, let's vote. Vote carries 5-0. All right, very good. All right, we'll stand by just for a minute. Let's see what we get here now. All right, so the next item is 10.4. And here again, we have to go back. Ms. Thrush, are you already on that?
It's the
Well,
sale
it's the
sale
res-
and disposal.
the
Okay, it's the resolution.
resolution.
Right.
All right, board members, you have a copy of the resolution entitled number 18-02. And this resolution pertains to the what, Mr. McKenna?
Yes, sir. This resolution will declare this property surplus and subject to disposal and authorize the superintendent to return to you recommendations for the actual disposal of the property.
And disposal means sale. Is that correct?
Disposal can mean sale, it can mean a lot of things, but she's just directed to bring back her
So
recommendations
we're going to leave it open.
to you, which
Okay.
sales have been discussed in this matter, that's correct.
All right, then. Okay, so I need a motion.
Move it.
Motion by Mr. Walker. It's his district, Mr. Bryant.
Oh,
But
yes,
certainly,
yeah,
sir,
yeah.
leaving, I mean, if you
Okay.
want to be the second?
Second, yes.
All right, Mr. Bryant will be the second. Looking for any discussion on this particular resolution?
I just want to ask the superintendent, will we be able to get this back by our next board meeting? Do you?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions or discussion, board members? All right, so we're ready to move forward. We have a motion
And a second.
Have a second also.
and a second. All right, so all in favor? Vote carries 5-0. Thanks, Dr. Smith. All right. I don't think there were any other items moved from consent.
No, sir.
Okay. All right, construction program owners representatives business, section 11, 11.1. Mr. Walker, do you have anything, sir?
No, other than, we're proceeding with the roofs at Eglin and proceeding the roof at, I forget the other school at this time, and also we're, have looked at the roofs at the STEM Center, and, I think we're gonna be able to maybe get by with a temporary patch on that one roof maybe for at least another year or two, but, and then we've had a kind of a very nice discussion about Richburg. It's moving along very well.
All right, thank you, Mr. Walker.
Oh, well, I'm sorry,
Sure.
I do have one
Okay,
question.
sure.
Well, all of you board members received a memo concerning uniforms.
Okay.
Are all of you aware of that?
Yes, sir.
And I was kind of slow on the uptake, and I maybe need to have Miss Jackson or Miss Scallion one. When I looked at the $10 a head that we would receive, assuming we'd get the grant in by September, but all of you read that it's limited funds, etc. But Miss Scallion or the superintendent one, I'm just, do we plan to participate in this? Because this did not indicate to me whether we was going to or not going to. But if we're going to participate in it, is there money available? Because it doesn't appear to me that even if we receive some type of grant at $10 a head, when you get into the uniforms, I think it's going to be a losing proposition.
Absolutely.
But I mean, I
Mr.
don't know.
Walker.
It didn't indicate to me, are we entertaining certain schools planning to apply for this, or we not
Well-
gonna apply for it, or what?
And Superintendent, I recognize you, but in my own district, I have a school that's already in uniforms.
We have some
And-
others.
And so my question is can they apply? Because
Well,
they're
and then
already
could
in.
they be paid for
Right,
that $10
exactly,
a head? And
exactly.
I just wanted to
Ms. Jackson?
get it clear.
And I wanted to send that to the board because that came to me last week. And I wanted you to have a chance to look at it because we already have some schools who have uniforms. And I didn't know if the board wanted me to reach out to other schools and see if they.
Mr. White pointed out, Dr. White, is what I'm curious about, and this reason I wanted to involve Rita, was the schools that already have them, are they gonna be eligible to be counted at that $10 a head, or is
I
it?
don't
are they
know
gonna
that.
not be grandfathered in, and the
already.
main thing I'm gonna be concerned about is if we apply for the money and a particular school gets it, is it a losing proposition? In other words, because I know the schools that have them, they've raised money and et cetera, because you have to make sure you cover the kids that can't afford uniforms, all of these kind of things. And we know one thing, at $10 a head, you can't, no way that that's gonna pay for a school to have uniforms unless you have a procedure like the schools that already have uniforms. And so it was left open to, and as we all know, we saw it's a short timeline to what, first around September, you have to have your grant in, and it was very emphatic that the money's limited and the money's gonna run out. But I didn't know what we planned to do.
And I'll get with Rita, Mr. Walker. I just wanted you guys to be aware of it because I have had some input from community members who are interested in their school going to, especially in the elementary schools and the middle schools, going to a uniform.
But it's just applies to
Yes,
elementary
sir.
and middle, correct? Is that correct?
It was interesting.
And the main thing, Ms. Jackson, as Lamar has mentioned, is we do need to find out whether the schools that are already doing it,
Sure.
if they apply, will they receive the money? I mean, I think that's something
Rita and I
very
will look at
important to
that
know.
tomorrow.
Huh?
We will, and I'll report back to you and then let you know the schools that have approached me,
Oh,
okay?
Comment? Yes, ma'am?
We're on construction.
Right.
Okay.
I understand. All right, 11.2, task order number 21, Richburg School Renovation Project, owner change order PCO 033, presented by Steve Bolton, Director of Facilities Planning and Maintenance, and recommended by the superintendent. This is an action item, so I'm looking
So
for-
moved.
Motion by Mr. Bryant. Looking for a second.
I'll second.
Second by Ms. Thrush. I don't see anyone wanting to discuss it. Let's vote. All in favor? Vote is 5-0. Information technology, no business there. Section 13, Mr. Attorney, your
No
business.
report
sir.
tonight.
No report. Superintendent, you had some out-of-state field trips, and then we're coming to anything else you might have.
I have one question. Ms. Thrush, are you going to go over the confusion about the impact-based testing and what Andrews is doing in the summer?
I can, or you can.
I have a
It's-
statement
it's
that we
really good
prepared.
news.
It's very good news.
And just want to make sure, the confusion is that we just want to make sure parents know that we have 2 free options for them. So it's a good news story, so I'll
Yes.
let you read the statement that you have.
Okay, we just wanted to share with parents that Andrews Institute began our summer pre-concussion assessment of athletes last week. It's a pretty intense little thing that they go through to check the kids so that if they are hurt during an athletic event, then the Andrews folks that are on the field have all that student's data in a computer, and they do little tests to see if the child is showing signs of a concussion. And it's wonderful to see what they do and take care of our kids. Athletes can call their school to get the date and time for the assessment at their school, or on the district website, you can pull it up on where the football game is being played on there. You can pull it up, and there is all the dates and times. Just because a student goes to school in Crestview or at Baker, they can go to any other school listed anywhere on that list because it's not convenient for everyone. Andrews uses an assessment that's called C3 Logic. There's no charge for this service if parents choose to take advantage of it. If an athlete cannot have the assessment on the date, they can go to any other school in Santa Rosa, Okaloosa, Walton, or Escambia. They can attend, and it tells them the time if they want to walk in and get the assessment. There are 29 opportunities offered to athletes in Okaloosa, Santa Rosa, and Escambia County. Once school begins, though, then coaches will administer what we call an impact test, and it's just something the kids go on the computer and do. The C3 Logic is they have them stand, they test their ability to do certain things. That's cataloged in that computer. If a kid gets hit in a football game, they have that information right there. They pull it up, they test those things that they know would indicate possibility of a concussion. For students unable to attend a summer assessment for parents who choose to have their student assessed, all the impact testing will take place after school starts. But I think it's important, since some parents have contacted us, this is free. Andrews provides all, they come to your school and provide all of this free. And I hope our students and our parents are taking advantage of that for their children. Okay?
And again, it's a service that the district pays for
Yes.
through the impact software that we pay for a license for. So both options are free to students, and provide multiple locations and opportunities to do it. And it's important to have that baseline assessment so that if there is a future incident,
And
you
I
have
think it's
something to
also
compare it to.
important, Mrs. Thrush, to let parents know they can opt out. They don't have to do this. But most of our parents do, because we had several incidences last year where kids were hit really hard, and they had this data. And so it was good for the child and for his treatment that we had that. I had asked Eric to share something tonight, but in the interest of time this evening, Eric, we're going to move forward on this. The only other thing that I would say is we had our hiring fair. We started this about 3 years ago, I think. It's the greatest thing ever. People come from all over the United States, some people from out of the country, to come and look at our schools so that we can hire folks. The good thing is that HR has made this where principals can hire on the spot. They can hire on the spot. Before we started doing this, we were hiring teachers 2 days before school started. That's not good for the teacher. That's not good for the students. So HR has worked, and Lindsay is here tonight. It was a phenomenal. I mean, everybody was bragging. Principals were calling me. They were so excited that we had that many people who want to come and teach in our county. And I can't blame them. It's, I think, the best county in the state. But I just wanted to share that with you and let you know
I
that
just
that
want to know
took
if any of
place.
those principals got in a bidding war.
I think there were a couple, especially with ESE, EBD,
I've been in
because
two
there are
of those.
so few of those folks that are out
Yes, ma'am.
there
That's
in the
right.
market.
It's a good thing. It's a good
That's
thing.
all. Thank
Yes,
you.
ma'am. Thank you. All right, so let's move on to board members' business. Mr. Bryan, I'll start with you, sir.
Okay, well, I'm going to follow up on the Teach at the Beach. I was actually there Saturday, and if you ever watch the NFL draft, it was kind of like that. All the schools
Yeah.
had their tables set up. I mean, it was really awesome to see how much pride each school took into their tables. But Lindsay, if you would, where are you at there? We'd just give Lindsay some kudos there. Her and her team did an awesome job. They had everything that those people needed to know about the school district, whether it was like retirement, health insurance, whatever. It was there. I know the support in the teachers union was there. Everybody was there to help answer questions. So it was really a great event. But it was, if you see like the draft, that's what it was like. They were jockeying to see who's got what. So.
Yes, it was, and we're going to have a report for you. I think maybe in October. August. We'll have a report for you in August with pictures, let you see the event, let you see, we're going to be bringing that information to you. The teacher shortage is a real thing. It is a real thing. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Bryant, is that it?
That's it.
Okay, how about Ms. Rush, going to you next?
I just wanted to touch base with the superintendent and staff on field trip policies. Just if it's possible, I know we've communicated about that in discussions with you and your staff, and having, I know, again, we have to advertise any policies through a public hearing, but if there's some way that we can work on establishing field trip policy prior to the school year starting, so that we standardize on both curriculum related and extracurricular field trips.
And I know Jeff has been working on that when you came to us before, but we had so many other policies we had to make changes
Right.
to, and that is extremely time consuming. But I know he is well aware of that and is working on that.
We've got a series of policies that I'm hoping will be actually brought to you at the very next meeting, because we are trying to get them adopted for school. We're going to be pushing it and probably adopting as school is beginning, but one of them we've been working on is the entire Chapter 4, which is the student section, which has taken a lot of time and a lot of departments' input there. We're working really hard this week to try to get that draft in front of you for advertising, because we certainly need to get that done.
And I know, and y'all know this, I mean, schools have their own policies too, regarding how they conduct business with field trips and those
They
kind of
do.
things. So I can tell you that's a big job. All right, anything else, Ms. Rush?
No, just again, wanted to mention that Education Week last week rated Florida an F in per pupil spending. We did get one of the best rates of all the states in the United States for financial equity among students. It is a good thing that the
Yeah,
state
we're all
of
broke.
that the state of Florida treats each child the same, regardless of where they live or regardless of their family's income. So that's a good thing, and why it's a good thing that our school districts follow our county boundaries. But again, we rank an F in per pupil funding, and you know, I only could hope that, just like the frenzy of an NFL draft, I wish the money that was associated with those draftees in the NFL was associated with our instructional and non-instructional staff.
All right, thank you, Ms. Rush. Mr. Destin?
I think I've said enough tonight.
All right, Mr. Walker?
Likewise.
Okay. Superintendent, Mr. Attorney, staff, anything? Okay, this meeting's over.
Nick, go get Lynn.
See you tomorrow, dude.
Yep.
Go get him.
Be careful going on.
Hey, Chris, let me give you
I
these
don't do
cards
it.
before I lose them. Get in trouble.
Oh, there was something else. Hey, Mary Beth.